Hi, and welcome to LA River X. We are going live for a panel discussion with three fantastic LA River X guest host alums. You're going to be meeting Peter Bennett, Avital Ayla, and Sarah G. Grant, three of the almost 50 people and organizations who have guest hosted LA River X since its establishment in the summer of 2019. I'm Tilly Hinton, the founder and curator of LA River X, and will be moderating this conversation. We're going to take a moment to get settled in and have our panelists come and join us. We will get underway in just a moment. While we are waiting for our panelists to join us, hey Sarah, it's good to see you. While we're waiting, feel free to let us know in the chat how you know about the LA River, what brought you to LA River X, and if you've got any questions for our panelists, slide those into the chat as well, and I will try and get to them during this 30 to 45 minutes. We have a soft ending here. We will see how the conversation goes. If you've just arrived, we are getting settled in. I'm Tilly Hinton from LA River X, and I'm joined by three incredible panelists. We have Avital, Sarah, and Peter Bennett, who is just arriving.
Hello.
Hey. And if you are in the audience, tell us in the chat what you know and love about the LA River. And seeing some familiar faces in there. And just another moment and we will get underway. All right, we are all here. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on Tongva land, and I pay my respects to elders and ancient and timeless cultures that underpin everything: the air, the land, the water, the river, the stories that animate this place. I'm Tilly Hinton. I founded LA River X as an experimental idea back in 2019 to see what it would be like to invite community members to tell their stories about the river in a digital form. Over the years, we have hosted almost 50 guest hosts, and you're seeing three of them on your screen right now: Sarah G. Grant, Avital Ayla, and Peter Bennett. So excited to talk to the three of you about photography. This panel is it's a deep dive into photography. We're going to talk gear, we're going to talk inspiration, we're going to talk geography, and we're going to talk about why the river matters as a subject to the three of you. In starting, I want to acknowledge that this event and many of the activities of LA River X during this year and next year are generously supported with a grant from California Humanities, which is a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and we are absolutely delighted to be one of the grantees for the Humanities for All program. That grant is a collaboration between LA River X, Pomona College, the Claremont College's library, and a generous helping of incredible community partners and advocates who are on board to assist with delivering the grant programming, which is going to include online events, real life events, exhibitions, all kinds of good things during this year and next year as well. So with that, let's get started. I wanted to begin, if I could, with you, Sarah, by asking you to tell us about the very first photo that you took at the LA River and the most recent photo that you have taken there. And tell us when those two things happened.
Sure. So I should preface all of this by saying that I'm not a photographer by trade or anything like that. Photography is very much just a way for me to get into birding, if that makes sense, to do it in kind of a safe space and be able to connect to people virtually. And so I think the first photo I took of the LA River was probably in 2015 when I moved to the neighborhood I currently live in Long Beach. And I don't think it was a photo of birds in particular. I think it was probably a swath of the end of where the concrete ends, if you will, looking south towards San Pedro and the bridge in Long Beach. And that was definitely my first photo of the LA River, and the first time I understood, I think, the grasp of the river itself. The most recent photo was actually, I think, yesterday. I was not with my camera. I just had my phone, and I think I took a photo of a killdeer that you couldn't even see on my phone, but I heard it and I was trying to look for it. And that was my most recent photo.
Fantastic. And then let's keep on the theme of particular photographs. Peter, you've recently released an incredible book of photos of the LA River that spans architecture, important people, nature, landscapes, and the very unexpected. What was the one photo that you absolutely had to include in the book? What was your non-negotiable hero photo that had to appear there? And by the way, it must have been incredibly difficult to narrow down your extensive LA River collection into that book, which is a wonderful, wonderful artifact.
Thank you. Yeah, editing it was a challenge, but it was also really enjoyable because editing, as in like editing down, is really storytelling, which is what you do. And when you start to get on the trail of a good story, you kind of get in that groove. So it was actually it was fun but challenging. As far as the picture, you know, I can get emotionally attached to a lot of pictures, but the one that had to be in there is the one where the river begins. I mean, I guess that's kind of where it starts, where I think it's Calabasas and Arroyo Grande, if I'm getting that right, kind of meet up. And there's kind of this weird little triangle where it comes to a point by the high school there, and kind of, you know, uneventfully, that's where the river starts to kind of to build. I didn't take a picture of the end of it down in Long Beach until kind of very end of the process, but got to have the beginning of the end, and then the kind of middle starts to fill itself in.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite images too. I think we often imagine rivers beginning, you know, idyllically up in mountains and streams, and that is of course true when we think about the river and its tributaries. But yeah, the official starting point is at a high school football field in Canoga Park, of all places, where the Arroyo Calabasas and Bell Creek meet each other. And often, I'm not sure, Peter, I can't quite picture your image right now, but often the water is a very different color in those two creeks. And so you get this incredible kind of meeting of the waters at that moment. It's a wonderful place.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to pick up the color because it's kind of in that channelized area. So it looks very dark, and then when it kind of spreads out and it's very thin, it kind of has a greenish cast. But a lot of that is
Like,
coming through the bottom. Yeah.
yeah. And Avatar, I wanted to ask you about your previous professional life and how that has played into your image making along the river. And you might need to give us a little background that I know, but folks in our audience will not know about what you did before you came to photographing the river and the incredible artistic and collage work that you're so known for now.
Thank
What's the
you.
interplay between past profession and current artistic practice? And tell us about an image that encapsulates that, if you would.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Wow, what a great question. I come from the world of forensic psychology. I have a master's. I worked in the field for a bit before transitioning into full-time art, whatever that means. And I think that the commonality between the two worlds is my incredible obsession with details. So in forensic psychology, it's very detail oriented, and my approach to photographing the LA River is very detail oriented, and it's very much like ground level. So my images are not going to be super wide, kind of landscapey. They're going to be more honing in on the details. You can actually see a couple of images here. So I tend to look for pops of color. I tend to look for details that kind of stand out and feel really incongruent within the landscape as I've come to understand the LA River. And I think that my obsession with details has allowed me to sort of really create a cool archive of all the sort of left behind or leave behind things of our culture that people kind of walk by and kind of think nothing of. I want to not only capture them, but I want to make them big and force you to look at them, which I think that's connected to forensic psychology, because we're looking at, like, in this case, it's a criminal behavior with intertwining with psychology, and it's very minutia oriented. Either way, it's about kind of blowing up these smaller things to make them mean more.
I love that, and I love that you bring it to the river. As you're listening to this, folks, I imagine that you're wishing that you could be seeing the images. And so let me remind you that you can indeed see the work of Avital, Peter, and Sarah on LA River X. Not right now, because we want you watching this. But the other spot that you can find their work is if you look at the link in the bio of LA River X, you'll find links to websites and Instagrams and so on. And the other thing that LA River X is working really hard on this year is archiving the images that have been shared in LA River X, numbering well over 1,000 now, archiving them forever in the Claremont College's library as part of the Western Water Archives. So not quite yet, but at a future point that is not that far away, you'll be able to very effortlessly search for images by all of the image makers who have been guest hosts on LA River X and who've given permission to have their materials archived in the Western Water Archives. You'll be able to browse, search, deep dive into that imagery through the Western Water Archives as well, which we are so excited about. I think we should talk gear. We can't have a photography panel unless we nerd out for just a little while about equipment, lenses, post-production, that kind of thing. So let me we'll begin with you, Sarah. What do you use to shoot at the river? I know you've mentioned that sometimes it's your cell phone, sometimes it's a camera. Talk us through what you're using and maybe why as well.
Yeah.
I'm dying to know, by the way. I'm dying to know.
I my most common everyday camera, I have a Panasonic Lumix GX80 that became a GX85 when it was stolen on a research trip not too long ago, and I had to replace it in another country. So my Panasonic Lumix mirrorless, it's also a really good kind of shoot from the hip when I'm doing field work camera. It's really light, it's really portable. I'm always carrying binoculars as well when I'm at the LA River. And so when you say gear, I almost think about my binoculars first, which are not fancy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm all about affordable, accessible engagement with the LA River and birds that I see here in Long Beach. So that's it, just my mirrorless camera.
And so it's got a zoom lens?
Yeah, I have, so it's 300 millimeter. But I often use my little Pancake 20 millimeter for my mirrorless as well. That's my most common lens, my everyday lens.
What about you, Avital? What are you taking down to the river or what are you doing in post?
Oh, yeah. I just always have it's my security blanket, my Pentex. I just kind of keep updating the digital. It's a DSLR Pentex. I use strictly prime lenses. I'm not a fan of the zoom. I want to get to the thing, and specifically, it's not even a long prime. It's a 35 millimeter. So whatever I'm shooting, I'm generally very close to it. And also beyond being very close to it, I'm also very low to it. So it's got to be very mobile. I don't have a tripod. It's just like walk and shoot, and it kind of becomes this very instinctive process. And I forgot the second part of the question.
What do you do with images in terms of post-production?
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about collage, perhaps?
Sure. Yeah, I actually practice printing them out and actually physically with my hands. I move things around. I start with a digital process and then I take it to an actual like analog process, and I just mess around. I look mainly for colors and lines to sort of like connect things. And I especially love messing with going from color to stark black and white back to color to really kind of I don't know. I guess I just love juxtapositions. Yeah.
And the river is so abundant with juxtaposition.
It's the perfect place for it.
It really is. Peter, talk to us about the gear that you use and any processes that you'd like to share.
I have, I think, 99% of the work I've done is shot with Canon 5Ds, various Mark iterations, and lenses, basically 3 zoom lenses. If I get this right, I think 17-24, and then a 24-70, and then 70-200, and then I have a 2x for the 200. I love the idea of prime lenses. I think that's how we find a style and a voice, and I used to use that almost exclusively back in my film days. But because of bad backs, I've limited my lens carrying around abilities, and they get the job done. I think I'm always cognizant of focal length, and I teach photography, and I go off on rants about that because it's like we go to a place, we stand there, and then we zoom in until we get it, and that's not the way you want to do it. You want to take the qualities of the lens and use that to kind of create what the image looks like, because and then stand where you need to use that focal length. I won't rant anymore about that. But as far as
you go on.
goes, I'm really big on workflow, so I take it into Lightroom. I then tweak it in Photoshop. I add keywords in Photo Mechanic, and then I back it up locally and to Backblaze is a cloud platform. So I work a lot with students in terms of workflow. I'm really big on that. Workflow is critical, especially if you want to stay organized and do the things you want to do with your images. But that's essentially it. I use Lightroom 99% of the time. I used to be a photographer. Now I feel like I'm a Lightroom person who takes pictures, but I think the way it is.
I love it. And speaking of organization, like I just recently realized that my archive of images is getting totally out of control. And it's like if you let it go for any amount of time without properly organizing, it becomes a beast. And that's where I'm at right now. So maybe I should take your class.
I'll talk.
I think we all should sign up for Peter's class. I need it as well, so badly. Yeah. I mean, we so often talk about the image making and we so rarely pay attention to the image preserving, both such important parts of the story. Sarah, I wanted to jump back to you because of this trio, you're the one who doesn't identify as a photographer, although I would beg to disagree. Your photos are incredible and so important. But would you talk to us a little bit about why photography and why the LA River have given you, I guess, a kind of entry ticket to bird watching, which can be a steep mountain to climb, right? Like a lot of terminology, a lot of complexity, people with really deep and profound bird watching knowledge, birding knowledge. How has this Instagram project of yours, LBC Birds of the LA River, how has that given you a way into birding culture? Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been into birds since I lived in Wisconsin in 2004. I lived by a sandhill crane preservation area just outside of Madison. And so I was really, really into birds at the time, but I didn't know there was a birding community, birding culture. It wasn't something that had ever been introduced to me. No one mentioned it. So, I think I've just been interested in birds peripherally since 2004, and actually it was really living in different places that had wild birds, from Arkansas to I've lived in Southeast Asia quite a bit over the years, And then moving to Long Beach, where I think I had this kind of intense fear that I wasn't going to be close to any birding spaces, but walking up and down the LA River pretty regularly and hearing the birds first, and then realizing that I needed to start bringing binoculars to the river, realizing that, I don't know how to identify any of these shorebirds. And so bringing books and then bringing cameras to help me try to understand what I'm seeing. And then, asking questions and realizing that there is a really big birding community around here, but it's people who are really serious. It's not always people who are just sort of there to walk the river and see what you see and make it a part of your daily life, as opposed to this big, sort of like a list that you're after, or, a lifestyle that revolves around birding and bird photography. I think for me, it really is about just everyday experience and making this river part of my existence here in Long Beach. And photography is a way for me to, I think, preserve those moments of daily walking and mindfulness, but also to learn a little bit more about the shorebirds that are here.
And to document them, because people are all too ready to say that nothing lives in the LA River or that it's not a real river. And testimony like yours is so crucial to us upholding this argument that the river is real, the river is full of life, the river deserves protecting, and your work is such a key part of that, so important. Peter, I wanted to ask you when you took your very first photo of the LA River, and then my follow-up question is, what keeps you going back? How come it still interests you after a fairly hefty length of time, with it being one of your photographic subjects?
Yeah, it turned into like a 12, 13-year project, which was not something I had planned for. I moved to LA from New York in 2001, and I signed up for a river tour with Folar, and it was with Jenny Price, naturalist, who I'm sure many of us know. And the first spot we went to was just, I think, east of or north rather, of the Sepulveda Dam in the Sepulveda Basin Recreation Area. And I think I took my first pictures there. I met George Wolfe there. He kind of kayaked down, and I'm like, where am I? What is going on here? There's birds and a dam and kayakers. And then we went down to the 6th Street Bridge and walked down the ramp. And that was like totally surreal. And so that day, those pictures I took, they're in the book because they kind of resonate with me. And I think that I write in my book, the first time, you see the LA River, what that experience is like. Sometimes it's from the air, sometimes it's, down there. There's not many places where you can really kind of go to it except some of the soft bottom spots. But that first day with Jenny, I think really kind of turned into something, it still wasn't a project that I planned, but it inspired me. And I don't go down as much as I used to. We were talking about that. I have some other projects, but I still love going down there. I was just down there a few weeks ago because it's a 51-mile canvas, right? And it's ever changing, and you never know whether you live right next to it, as Sarah does. You never know what you're going to see. And if you go with expectations, you can get disappointed. But if you go there with an open mind and an open, kind of vision, you can always be pleasantly surprised.
That sounds like a lesson in life as well as a lesson in river photography, for sure. I'm going to ask this of all three of you, actually. Let's have you all answer this. Is there a photo that you still have not made at the LA River that is in the back of your mind or the front of your mind that has eluded you so far, or that hasn't arrived in your frame quite yet?
I think for me, it's mostly, it's the very first picture that I understood that I took of the river was at night. And I've taken a few more images of the river at night, but I feel like I don't really understand the river at night at all. So I think there was one takeover at the LA River X. I forgot the artist's name and I apologize, but they had a lot of night photography.
It
And
was
so,
Chi Chick McClure.
right, beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And she did, it was like these like medium format images, gorgeous stuff. And I thought, this is something that I'm not really paying attention to, is the river at night. And I'm not sure how the details look at night, but I would like to find out.
Fantastic. I'm excited to see what happens when you do that. Peter, how about you? What's an image that is a glimmer in your eye but doesn't exist yet in your body of work?
I kind of smiled when you asked that. It's strangely enough, I've never been able to get a great picture that juxtaposes the trash, the plastic bags with the bird life and the river. I've done many attempts, but I've done a lot of work with a lot of organizations about trash, ocean, plastic in the ocean, and so on and so forth. And I've never gotten that that money shot of like plastic bags clinging to a tree with like, some kind of bird life that really kind of, tells the damage that this really, does. And one day.
That's really remarkable because it's not like there's a shortage of opportunities.
No.
Yeah,
I feel like I have at least a few
up,
examples of that.
yeah. Whatever.
Amazing.
Long Beach is really the spot for that, right? Because everything is flowing out here and it gets caught up in Long Beach. It really is a very, very different part of the river because of that trash flow, right?
Yeah. I've been down Bloom and I've seen it all collect there, but yeah.
I have such mixed feelings about this photo because I would love it to be a scenario where you could never take that photo, where we sort ourselves out around recycling and trash disposal and protecting the river. I'd love it to become an impossible photo for you to get. But I also know your photographic eye and what an amazing photo it's going to be when you do get it. So, feelings. Sarah, what about you? What's the photo that you have not yet made that we can look forward to in future posts from you on Instagram or elsewhere?
I think it's probably a deep multi-species interaction photo because of the area that I frequent the most. It's kind of a fishing area. In fact, there's a pretty active carp fly fishing community that goes to this pool, and there's a lot of interspecies interactions that I hope to capture, especially when the carp are kind of running upriver too. There's a lot of really interesting things happening there that I don't quite grasp ecologically that I'd really like to understand. And yeah, one day I'd like to capture those images.
What time of year does that happen?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
What time of year do they do that?
Coming up pretty soon. In fact, I need to go back and look at some of the carp photos I have. I use that as like a marker of when things are happening in the rivers. So I feel like it's right about now. Yeah. But the fishing happens all through the summer. You'll always see people fly fishing down here in Long Beach.
Incredible. I mean, fishing is just one of these many stories, isn't it, that really surprise people about the river. That it has water in it at all still seems to surprise people, despite the fact that that has been so for quite some time. And then that people actually fish is, yet another layer of kind of wonderment about this river and something so in need of protecting in many stretches, Long Beach and the Glendale Narrows as well. I wanted to ask each of you about your current artistic practice. Can you tell us what you're working on at the moment and where we find you and what we need to know about you and your work? Peter, let's begin with you, and I would love you to show and tell your book if you would. Where do we find your work? What are you working on? How can we stay connected with what you're up to?
I post most of the projects I work on my website, citizenoftheplanet.com, and I have been actually focusing a lot on local wetlands. I'm always kind of find myself attracted to water. I've done a lot of work up in the Central Valley on kind of environmental justice, oil production next to agriculture and drought and so forth. But those are kind of periodic trips I make up there. The work I'm doing mostly is on local wetlands, Ballona wetlands, which is what I'm near, Bolsa Chica is where I visited. Gonna forget the names of them, but there's a lot. And the thing I love about them is they're kind of little windows into kind of what it used to look like, right? So, you know, if it's in somewhat its original shape, like you go there and that's kind of a snapshot of what this area looked like. And I kind of find it remarkable. And there's sometimes just closed in areas in the middle of an urban kind of, you know, setting where you have this preserved wetlands, or sometimes it's a coastal wetlands. But I love it there. And, you know, Sarah will know that the bird life there is so abundant. I'm not a birder, but I love to shoot the birds in the context of kind of that natural habitat. So that's kind of an area that I kind of find myself going back to, and it's very peaceful. You go there, and if it's not too crowded, it's just a really beautiful, peaceful place to be in kind of this urban, you know, Mishigash that we live in. So, you know, that's kind of where you'll find me. This is my book. I practically sold out. I have a few copies of the hardcover and a very few copies of the softcover, which I hope to reprint. But I'm trying to get in as many hands as I can. Fuller was a huge help with that. And I've just been really kind of grateful and feeling blessed about being able to do it.
It's a
Can I ask a
fantastic
story
book.
about the book? Can I ask a question about the book real quick?
Good.
Is it,
Of course.
I don't have it yet, or, you know, maybe you'll do a second printing, but is it like how are you telling it? Are you telling it by the chronology of, you know, starting in Canoga Park and getting to Long Beach? Yeah. So like, almost like somebody can follow the.
Yeah, that's a good, thank you for asking that. So I wanted people to kind of learn about the river and be entertained. So what I did is I have it divided up into sections. So I have the beginning of the river and the valley, the Glendale Narrows, the confluence downtown, and then the southern part of, and then before each chapter, there's like a little map with the whole river. So you get a general, within each chapter, it's not geographically accurate, but the chapters kind of will take you from Canoga Park down to Long Beach. Thank you.
Nice.
Did you know that structure to start with, Peter, or did it take a whole lot of workshopping to decide how on earth to structure the story of your book?
It was floating around in my head, and then when I just needed to make the decision, it became pretty obvious. Yeah. Yeah.
It's neat that way.
Yeah, it is. It tells its own story. You just kind of have to kind of like, you know,
Let it.
help it.
Yes, yeah, just help it along. Exactly. Isn't that what we're all doing? Sarah, what about you? What are you working on? What do we need to know about you, and how can we stay in touch with your work?
Yeah, I think probably the easiest way to stay in touch with me is just to find my academic profiles. So my website is sarahggrant.com. You can always just Google my name, and I think my faculty profile will come up. I'm trained as a cultural anthropologist. I'm really sort of moving in environmental anthropology directions. And my next project is actually about birding communities, specifically birders of color, and the ways that birding and bird photography as well has become this kind of environmental intervention and a new form of environmentalism that we might use to rethink the spaces that we preserve and how we preserve them. So that's coming up. But as you know, the pandemic certainly slowed down a lot of research projects, but I now have human subjects approval to start doing some interviews, and certainly people who follow LA River X, you might actually be hearing from me as I solicit for some surveys and interviews in the future.
Fantastic. Is that work focused on the LA River, or is it a broader swath than that?
It is Southern California. In fact, Bolsa Chica, that frequent Bolsa Chica, mostly because I am faculty in Orange County, even though I live here in LA County. But certainly people will get a sense of what those, I guess you could call them alternative birding communities that aren't sort of mainstream trained, just kind of figuring it out DIY. I would say, let's call them intersectional birding communities.
Can't wait to read it.
I gotta say, when I saw your takeover, it made birding accessible. Like I don't know anything about it. And I love that your approach is like, neither do I, but you can get a camera and you can just go out there and you can start learning about it. And I feel like your takeover really made birding, which feels like a very kind of niche, you know, like if you have a bunch of spare time kind of a thing. And I really felt after looking at your takeover that like I was looking at birds and I was really becoming fascinated with that. And so I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so glad you felt that way.
Avital, how about you? Where do we find you? What are you working on? What's bringing you joy in artistic practice at the moment?
Joy. I'm looking for my joy. I hear there's some books about it, I guess. But no, right now I do have a show and tell. I'm working on a deeply personal series. It's called Bloodworks. It's kind of detailing living with an autoimmune disease and what that means and how it kind of overtakes your life. I have it's a multimedia project. It's available, the sort of work in progress is available on my website right now, which is linked to from my Instagram. But I feel like the best way to kind of follow along if you're interested in what I'm doing is to just kind of follow along Instagram, because I'm not like overly posting. I just kind of, I do mostly work internally, and then once I feel like something is ready to be shared with the public, I will put that out there, and hopefully, you know, people will I don't know, vibe with it or be curious about it or whatever. But as I was saying before we got together, I need to go back to the river. Like it's been way too long. So I look forward to potentially doing that, maybe even today, Easter Sunday.
Today would be a perfect day for it. I hope so too.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic segue into our very final question, which I'm going to ask of all three of you. Can you play tour guide for a moment and take us to one location each on the river where you love to shoot? Maybe because it's surprising, maybe it's a hidden gem, maybe it's abundant, maybe it's visually arresting, whatever it is. Guide us to a place that is really photographically important to you at the river. And let's get a little practical so that people watching this who might want to go there will know how to find their way. Peter, would you jump in first with your favorite river photography spot, or one of them at least?
You know, it's funny. I used to lead the Los Angeles River Photographic Adventure. It was a 10-hour tour led by the Los Angeles Center of Photography, and I did it for years. And people would pay a lot of money to me to take them for 10 hours up and down the river, because these areas were either inaccessible, a little bit intimidating, or, you know, a fence you had to crawl through. And eventually it all dried up because it's become so much more accessible, which is great. That's what we want. So, you know, some of the areas that are my favorites are so accessible. They're not, you know, it's like Glendale Narrows. That's where I still love to go, you know, bird life and all that. Where I found myself kind of going the last few years was down south of the river, areas like Paramount and Willow Street Bridge down in Long Beach. But there's one area, it's just, the concrete it's just very graphically for photographers. I think there's just a lot of interesting kind of light and shadow plays and so forth. But there's one particular area I love. It's the Dominguez Gap wetlands. And I think probably Sarah knows it. It's down in Long Beach. And it's this beautiful little area. I think it's been restored. It's certainly not natural, but there's just little walkways and reflections and birds. And it's just adjacent to the river. So you just go right over the river and you're in the concrete channel. And then you have this kind of beautiful restored wetlands there. And they've done a remarkable job there. So I would give directions, but I'm on the phone and I don't want to kind of mess it up. It's really easy to find Dominguez Gap wetlands, and it's down in Long Beach, and there's parking, and it's really accessible and really pretty.
It's a fabulous spot. Such high contrast that you're down in those river adjacent wetlands and then you climb up over the embankment and you're in extraordinarily wide and dense concrete main channel. It's a wonderful spot. So good. It's not all that well signed. It's easy to get to the entrance of it, but there's not a lot of signage at the entranceway. So it's a slight act of trust, I always think. Once you park your car in that residential area, you have to just know that the one pathway is going to take you to the right place. That's a wonderful spot. Thank you. Who would like to jump in next with a favorite location to guide us to?
I can jump in. I think it follows Peter's pretty well. So I'm going to plug south of Dominguez Gap. And you mentioned the Willow Street Bridge, but I just south of the Willow Street Bridge where the concrete ends and it becomes actually kind of a, riverbed, right? That's my favorite spot to go year round for birds. I mean, you're always going to see something interesting and you might see something spectacular. There are osprey there with some regularity. There are, there's certainly killdeer all over the place. You're going to see herons, you're going to see egrets, you might see other variety of hawk in the neighborhood. But if you walk south from the Willow Street Bridge, you're in a totally different world. It feels like you're not necessarily in a city at all anymore, and you can walk and certainly look up and see that there's a really big bridge and that you're heading into kind of a port industrial area. But for a moment, you can just sort of look at the water and all the wildlife around, and it's spectacular. And I love that it is so accessible, close, and parking's really easy. I think there was a KCET article about this particular spot some years ago, maybe 2010, 2011. Highly recommend checking it out. And it's just 25th and Willow in Long Beach.
Fantastic. Sarah, what about time of day? Is it dawn and dusk for the best bird watching and bird photography, or is it some other time?
In theory, yes, but I think afternoon is actually a really good time to see a lot of bird action, especially at this bridge in particular. There's no shortage of birds any time of day. I actually prefer, I know it's sunny out and there's no shade whatsoever, but I actually prefer afternoon because then you miss the cyclists who are just kind of by on the path, and it's usually pretty empty, and it does feel like a getaway, and I still get to see birds every time I go. I've never turned up empty.
Incredible. Avatal, what's your secret place that you're going to reveal to us?
It's not so secret, but it's seriously one of my favorites. I'm going to bring us up north. We're going to be basically off the 134 Victory Boulevard. Griffith Park is on one side. There's a park on the other side. The ABC sign is off in the distance. And this area of the river has shaped so much of the way that I see it. I visited it after a torrential storm. And as you guys know, after torrential rain, everything gets caught. All of the detritus of the city gets caught in the river. And to get down there with a 35 millimeter and to start focusing and honing in on these details, it's a playground of juxtapositions, and oxymorons, and trying to understand humanity. So basically you can park in front of this park that's right off the freeway, off of Victory Boulevard, and you walk toward the river, and then you could just keep going and going and going. And I feel like it's not so secret, but it may be skipped over because Griffith Park is right there. And then there's the park on the other side and the equestrian center. You're apt to see horses. You're definitely apt to see lots of herons. You're apt to see fungi, lots of fungi everywhere after the rain. And the coolest part about it is that the concrete, you have your concrete area and then it breaks and you're on soft bottom. So it's this full confluence of like all of the things that have come to me to represent the river sort of in one location. And I hope that it is not a secret spot. I hope that like, let's see people out there enjoying it.
What a wonderful note to end this panel on. And I'm glad we did this at this time of day and on such a perfect day, because there are hours left to get out onto the river right now, if you're free. so many incredible locations, 51 miles plus the tributaries, of which there are more than a dozen, all of them ripe and ready for photography, and all of them really needing us to photograph them, to notice them, to pay attention, and to advocate for their protection as we move forward. And the river is increasingly and always under various threats. And through photography and through storytelling, which sometimes can seem a little soft touch, we actually tell really powerful stories that can transform how people understand the city, how they imagine themselves and their relationship with nature. And really the future of the river rests to a great extent on the stories that we tell about it and the images that we make of it. So I want to really thank the three of you, Avital, Peter, and Sarah, for making time to snuggle in and talk about the LA River and your artistic practice. Thank you for being LA River guest host alums. You are in a family of incredible photographers, and I want to extend the invitation to people watching this that if you are taking photos of the river, if you are making art about the river, we need to talk. We need to amplify your stories as well. So please reach out to LA River X. I want to acknowledge again that this is funded by California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it's a partnership between LA River X, Pomona College, and the Claremont College's library. That is it from me. Links in bios to connect to all of these, and I'm going to give the last word to any of the three of you who have something to say, and I know that Peter does. Over to you.
And I think I speak for many people. Thank you for all the incredible work you've done and the dedication to this project and where it started and where it's grown. I mean, you've done a remarkable job, and I really thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tilly. Really, really thank you. Beautiful.
That is so kind of you. Thank you. I feel like it's my task, you know. This river demands us to pay attention to it, and I'm so pleased that I've been kind of anointed by that responsibility, and I'm finding my way, figuring out how to storytell about this important place and amplify other people's stories, most importantly. So thank you. That's all for now. We have so many things coming up this year and next year: exhibitions, events, publications, gatherings, all kinds of things. But in the meantime, the best thing that you can do is follow all three of these fabulous folks on Instagram, check out their work, and make sure that you're following LA River X and our Spanish language sibling, which is Rio de los Angeles X, also on Instagram, and stay in touch. Share your photos with us, reach out if you'd like to be a guest host, and sign up for the newsletter, all of the things. Come and join the LA River X family and make the most of this beautiful afternoon and get out to the river if you can. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.